Hey, okay. So I know that I have a lot of videos I need to upload. I got behind on my editing, so I apologize. But I wanted to talk about something that came to my attention. This is something that's actually been circulating for about a couple weeks now. And Yeah, Mary Shelley has been the topic of interest, and usually you see her name in October towards Halloween time. Yeah, the spooky time. And me being American, we're getting ready for Thanksgiving, and or as I put it, the National Eat Yourself into a Coma Day. 'Cause that's what I do. I just and, but you don't I mean, it would be along the same lines of suddenly talking about Dracula on Christmas. I mean, I would, but I'm not normal, so So, I was curious, and I looked it up, and basically, I guess, from what I'm understanding, and you can correct me, of course, the New York Times uh, put out this article talking about science fiction in literature. And so they were talking about like H.P. Lovecraft and Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. And people are actually saying, they're saying, hold up, time out. Mary Shelley. I guess that they were, I guess in the article, because I didn't read the article, I guess that they were saying that it starts in like in the 1890s or 1880s. Well, that's not true. It's absolutely not true. But, this goes along the line. I've said before on this channel where a lot of times we just accept something for what it is, and I usually talk about the Disney princesses. You know how when somebody mentions, like, for instance, Snow White, and we just decide that the clothing that you see in the Disney movie, that's that's what Snow White always wears, or The Little Mermaid, she always has to have red hair. No, she doesn't. I saw an anime from the '70s, she had blonde hair, and, there's another anime from the '80s, it was a TV series, it didn't run for very long, she had, like, brown hair. So, just because Disney puts it out there doesn't mean that that's established, that has to be. And, for some reason, we go with it, and that's how it is. It's like we grow up with it, and we can't detach from that. And and the reason I bring this up is because I always grew up, and I'm sure a lot of others, hearing that, like, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were the fathers of, um, science fiction. So but so we just accepted it and we never really questioned it. So with that said, um, I'm actually glad that people are speaking up because because the thing to understand also is Edgar Allan Poe, he wrote science fiction. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. He actually there's actually illustrations that he made. He was intrigued by this I want to say it was a dirigible, but they had like this whole moment and during his, I think it was the 1830s and 1820s, where they had airships. And, like the balloons, and then, like I said, I think it's dirigible and other things like that. And there was, in Germany, one of those airships that went from Germany to France, I think. Well, Edgar Allan Poe was just intrigued by this. He just thought that was really cool. And so he wrote about it. He wrote stories about this, and there's illustrations and everything like that. So yeah, he wrote science fiction. And I don't remember what stories, but there is a book that is Edgar Allan Poe's science fiction, and that's specifically his science fiction stories. But again, he died in the 1840s. Frankenstein came out in 1818. And so and the thing to remember is Edgar Allan Poe was he 1806, I believe, because he was 40 when he died, and it was 1846 that he died. So um yeah. And so yeah, she was Mary Shelley. And I mean, you even look at like cinema, and I mean, like they recently did The Invisible Man, and I know that some people think that that was based off an actual event, like an actual case that happened. And even with it saying in the credits based off H.G. Wells characters. Because I was watching Bailey Sarian, and she did a case, and there were a lot of people who were like, "This is creepy," because it's just like that new Invisible Man movie, and it's like it's just completely coincidence that it is, unfortunately. And but they, as I was saying before I get completely off track, they did Invisible Man movies. And for those of you who are Titanic fans, Gloria Stewart, who played Old Rose, she was in, I think, the first one. And so, yeah, she did horror movies. If you didn't know that. And, but the one that made the most, I mean, Boris Karloff was very successful as the Frankenstein monster. I think they made more Frankenstein movies than they did any other monster movie. And they were making a lot of crossovers throughout the 50s. Gotta love those crossover movies. Yeah, and like they had one that was like the Three Musketeers and Zorro. I know that's not a monster movie, but that one cracks me up. And it's not terrible, but if you want a good laugh, yeah, it's they used to show that quite a bit on Saturday afternoons, after the cartoons were over. They had that one run quite a bit, and it's it's like I said, it's not terrible, but they had those crossovers for a lot of those, monsters and everything. You almost always had Frankenstein. So, and of course you had Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Uh, Abbott and Costello met all of them, I think. But my point in bringing all that up is Frankenstein was the most popular, and that's Mary Shelley's creation. So how, I mean, of course, there's Dracula. Dracula isn't science fiction though. But you have these others, Invisible Man. Invisible Man was like, okay. I mean, they did like Invisible Man's wife, Invisible Man's kids, and Invisible Man. They were adding a whole bunch of things in the 30s. And then we got Hollow Man. I remember we laughed at that one. I was in high school, and then but you support it because it's Kevin Bacon, you know? I'm sure if I were to watch it now, it wouldn't be that bad. It would actually be, yeah, there was one, I think it was a Phenomenon, and we ripped it apart, but then I watched it not too long ago. I'm like, "This is actually a good movie." But but people really didn't like it back then, so I don't know. I don't know what goes on with that. But anyway, so yeah, I actually support that people are saying, "Hold on here, time out." Mary Shelley. And, as much as I love Jules Verne, I've said it on this channel before, uh, Jules Verne is one of my favorites. And, H.G. Wells, I love his work, but I have learned some things about H.G. Wells. He was rather arrogant. I found out that he would go to the films, like the science fiction film, like, he went to Metropolis, right? And he was like, "This is a silly film." And that was the kind of stuff that he did all the time. He would go to these he was invited to see these films, and it was like he was always finding something bad about them. I have yet to hear that he actually liked any of these films. And I'm thinking, "Dude, they weren't making films of your book. So shut up." Like, Arthur Conan Doyle, they made a movie of, The Lost World, that dinosaur movie, and he was in it. So, yeah, shut up. I don't know. I had a problem with that one. I mean, why didn't they make as far as I know, they didn't make any silent films of any of his stuff. So, I'll have to check that out. I should have done that before I sat down, but yeah, I kinda had a problem with his attitude and, the things you learn about people. And, but I like I love Time Machine and everything, but I support that people are actually bringing up Mary Shelley. They're like, no, the science fiction thing doesn't start in 1898 or the 1890s or anything. It doesn't even start with Edgar Allan Poe. Again, I'm a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe, but it doesn't start there either. But I also have to say that it doesn't start with Mary Shelley. I'm sorry. I love Mary Shelley. I love her work and I love her. She's quite the rebellious woman. She really is. And her father had his own ideas and she was not going to follow them. And you got to love that. And but there was also and a lot of people are actually bringing up this uh woman as well, and because there's also Margaret Cavendish. Margaret Cavendish is from the 1600s, and she was a philosopher, a poet, a scientist, and a playwright and a writer. Now, she wrote The Blazing World, and it's known as one of the earliest examples of science fiction. I will put her information in the description box for you. If you've never heard of her, I highly recommend you you read up on her because she's a very interesting lady. And so and again, I'm not discrediting Mary Shelley at all, but science fiction didn't start with her. However, I think she helped bring back the concept of science fiction, or I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. Too many thoughts in my brain right now. But again, there's Margaret Cavendish. And now, when you look at uh, the definition of science fiction, because I wanted, I have a thought here. I have many thoughts, but so looking at science fiction, it says fiction based on imagined future scientific or technological advances and major social or environmental changes, frequently portraying space or time travel and life on other planets. So that got me to thinking, uh, isn't that mythology? I mean, so let's think about this for a second here, because we have Margaret Cavendish and Mary Shelley, but let's go further back and look at ancient times. And because a lot of the mythology, which at the time that was active religion, we got to remember, we have to remind ourselves that it wasn't mythology. It at the time it was their active religion, and they were worshiping these gods and everything. And the other thing that we seem to forget, sometimes I do as well, is that the world was brand new. They didn't understand how things were happening around them. So, like, even when lightning happened, why was that happening? They didn't understand these natural phenomenons or anything. So for them to explain it was like because the gods were angry and all that. So they needed to explain it so it made sense to them. And that's why the mythology is there. And so when you look at the mythology in different uh, cultures and everything, just like the lightning strike, that would be like Thor's hammer, and that's Norse mythology. And just like with the flooding of the Nile, there's different things with that. They had different. The ancient Egyptians centered their lives around the the sun setting, the sun rising. A lot of their temples, it's been realized just where they're placed and everything. So, I mean, it was such a natural phenomenon to them. And so, and um, another thing I want to point out is, there were travelers, and they, of course, talked amongst themselves, when they're at their encampment and they're talking. Well, I don't think it was just guys that were talking around the fire. I'm sure that there were women talking amongst themselves, chattering away, telling their little stories and everything. I'm sure there are tons of stories that are lost to us, which is too bad. And but I mean, it's been realized that, as I butcher the English language, but that the story of Cinderella actually goes back to ancient times, and currently they're trying to pinpoint what culture. it comes from. We may never know because again, they were traveling back and forth and telling these stories, and as people do even today, you tell something and then somebody goes and they, you know, break a they say their goodbyes, go, and then this person will tell the story, but then take credit for it. Oh yeah, this is the story of my people. Yeah, something to that effect. But they think that uh, they have it down to two cultures. It's either Greece or China, and like I said, we may never know. But at least we have the story. We all like the story of Cinderella. 2021 seems to like it a lot. I mean, I think I've seen at least 3 movies made this year for Cinderella. Okay, we need a break. Uh, I know it's a side note, but there's only, like, 2 movies that I absolutely love of Cinderella, and that's Brandy's Cinderella and Ever After. And when I was a kid, I loved the Disney movie, but, I'm not a kid anymore. I I will say this, the animation in Cinderella doesn't get enough credit because when she's going down the hall, seriously, that house is amazing. It's absolutely gorgeous. And, I mean, just and then when they show the part where they're at the castle and just yeah, I love the animation in that where they're showing, like, the buildings and everything. Doesn't get enough credit, and, but anyway, that's a side note. Yeah, but, um, another thing to consider is, uh, like, Mary Beard. I watch a lot of Mary Beard. I absolutely love her. I love her and Joan Fletcher. If you've never watched these 2 ladies, they're so much fun to watch. And, if you love, watching documentaries, uh, Mary Beard focuses on ancient Rome, Joan Fletcher focuses on ancient Egypt. And Mary Beard said that there were women who, uh, had successful businesses in ancient Rome, and you have to consider that they told a lot of different stories and everything. Maybe it was, uh, the mythology stories and that I mean, you think about it, how many of those stories, the myth stories centered around Zeus getting a girl pregnant? I remember I took a myth and legends class in high school, and I just remember where, we where we would, uh we tried to keep count of how many times he was going down to Earth to get and finally, one of the kids in class, he says, "Do you think that whenever a girl, uh, got pregnant and that was her excuse, Zeus did it." She got pregnant by a guy that her parents didn't like. It was it's a miracle child. Oh my gosh. So, and, yeah. I can only imagine, like, one of those ladies, because one of the ladies that Mary Beard talked about, she, owned a bar and, what was considered a bar back then, and, I can just imagine talking to a bunch of drunks, and she's like, "Yeah, my friend, she's pregnant now, and Zeus is the father." Oh my goodness. And, and then, if the child doesn't survive, it's because his wife came in the night and or something. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. But that's, that's how they thought. And, they always had an answer for everything, you know? And, but you look at some of these, uh, mythology stories, like, well, you think of Osiris and what happened to him, his brother betrayed him and he was chopped to bits, scattered all over. And, that's kind of like Frankenstein in a way, except there was magic involved, not the science. Eh, and then he became the god of the underworld. Yeah, it has a Frankenstein, uh, similarity to it in ways. And then how the Milky Way was, I think that's Roman. It's hard to tell. I mean, it could be Roman or Greek or the same, but the way that the Milky Way was, made, and of course the planets are named after Roman gods, and, you know, and people back then, they were all about philosophy and science and all of that, so, um, but I would not be at all surprised if there were science fiction stories back then as well. I mean, I personally think that a lot of the mythology, again, it was active religion back then, but they were finding answers to everything that happened because, uh, again, everything was new around them. Why did lightning strike? That was their answer, is because the god Thor banged his hammer down, and that, it was the god. The god Thor did it. And, so, but anyway, so I'm not, in closing, before I make this longer than it already is. In closing, um, I'm not discrediting Mary Shelley. I actually support everybody who jumped on this and said, "Wait, there's Mary Shelley." Because again, uh, we do this a lot as humans. We see something, we grow up with it, and we don't really question it. Just like I said with the Disney princess thing, um, we're raised seeing Sleeping Beauty or Snow White in certain clothing, or even like the Little Mermaid. She has to have red hair. No, she doesn't. She doesn't have to have red hair. And, well, this is the same thing. Science fiction does not start in 1890s. And I think this is a good wake up call for all of us. And, but we also need to remember, like, Margaret Cavendish. Again, I will put her information in the description box. And I just thought, as a side note, I would mention mythology as well. And, as I rambled longer than I needed to about that. And, I'm not discrediting, Margaret or Mary Shelley in the least, but I think I just wanted to, throw that in there. And anyway, but I would love to hear what you have to say. And, anyway, so yeah.